How different is Scottish and English DNA, and what are some differences in people with these ancestries around the world? Well, in this video we'll go through 5 key points, and we'll also look at some of the DNA markers of royal lineages in both Scotland and England. But the first clue is surnames. Now look at this table. This shows some of the most common surnames in people with Scottish and English ancestry around the world. Scottish surnames are often linked to clans, and prefixes like Mac or Mick are common, meaning son of course. English surnames, by contrast, are often occupational or location-based. And many surnames that are common amongst the English diaspora actually have a Welsh influence. These are names like Jones and Evans, showing the links between the two countries. Yet when it comes to Scottish and English surnames around the world, there is plenty of overlap as well. If you look at this table, you can see surnames like Smith, Brown and Wilson are common in people with both Scottish and English ancestry. And let me know in the comments below what your surname is, and whether you have Scottish or English ancestry, or both. But despite some overlap, surnames and middle names, both of you and your ancestors, can reveal quite a lot about your ancestry. Now the second clue as to Scottish versus English DNA comes in autosomal DNA differences. Now at a broad level, the people of Scotland and England share the same broad ancient foundations, made up of 3 main peoples: Western hunter-gatherers, early European farmers and then steppe ancestry. Although Scotland tends to show slightly higher steppe and hunter-gatherer ancestry, while England has a bit more early European farmer input, the more noticeable divergence appears in the medieval period. First of all, Viking ancestry followed different patterns in both countries. Danish Vikings had much more of an influence in England, for instance, while Norwegian Vikings impacted Scotland more strongly, particularly in places like Orkney and Shetland, where Norse influence peaks. Overall, Viking ancestry levels are fairly similar in both populations, however. Another key migration had a much more divergent impact. This was when Anglo-Saxon ancestry arrived, and had a major impact, especially in the east and the southeast of England. Although there is plenty of regional variation, English DNA in certain regions often clusters closer to German, Dutch and Danish populations. Overall then, Scotland retained more of its earlier Atlantic Celtic genetic structure, and generally clusters closer to Irish and Welsh DNA, especially in the west of the country. English DNA, on the other hand, generally has a stronger pull towards continental Europe, although this generally decreases in western and northern regions. Now the third clue is location. If you look at this table, you can see the breakdown of English and Scottish ancestry around the world. As you can see, English is much more common than Scottish, with over 100 million people estimated to belong to this diaspora. Within countries as well though, these ancestries are elevated in certain regions. If you look at this map of English ancestry in the US for instance, you can see the regional variation. It is concentrated in the northwest and interior west, especially states like Utah, which is at 27% in this map. It is also high in northern New England and the northeast, especially Maine, Vermont and New Hampshire. Clusters are also found across the Mountain West and parts of Appalachia. Scottish ancestry is broadly similar, but with some differences. Scottish ancestry is generally lower in Nevada and California in the west, for instance. Yet Scots are also concentrated in the northwest and the interior west, and northern New England and the northeast, similar to English. And when you include Scots' Irish ancestry, the pattern shifts more clearly towards the Appalachian Mountains and the upland south, namely West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee and the Carolinas, reflecting historical frontier settlement. If we look at Canada, English ancestry is most concentrated in 2 different ways. By raw numbers, it is largest in Ontario and British Columbia. But by share of the population, it stands out most in Atlantic Canada, especially Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island. Scottish ancestry is even more heavily concentrated in Atlantic Canada, with its strongest presence in Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia, while Ontario still has the biggest total number of people reporting Scottish origin. In Australia, English and Scottish ancestry is widespread, but it becomes more concentrated in relative terms in Tasmania and South Australia, while parts of rural Victoria and New South Wales also retain high concentrations. If we turn our attention to New Zealand, the pattern is even more regionally distinct. Scottish ancestry is most concentrated in the Southern and South Island, particularly Otago and Southland, around Dunedin, which gets its name from the Scottish Gaelic name for Edinburgh, meaning Fort of Eden. English ancestry is strongest in Canterbury and across much of the North Island. Across other countries as well, there is regional variation. But what about other factors? Well, the fourth clue is Y DNA haplogroups. If you look at this table, you can see the high-level breakdown of the main Y DNA haplogroups in the two countries. Now, we will look at some more refined branches in a second, and also some royal lineages. But on a high level, R1b-L21 is much higher in Scotland, associated more with Atlantic Celtic ancestry, and linked to the ancient bell beakers. England has much higher levels of R1b-U106 on the other hand, connected to the Anglo-Saxon migrations and Germanic ancestry in general. There was some overlap as well with Danish Vikings when it comes to this marker, however, and that was the subject of my last video if you haven't seen it. You can also see that Scotland has a little more R1a-Z284, a marker connected to Norwegian Vikings, which is especially high in the Northern Isles of Orkney and Shetland. Now, as far as some more refined branches, a common branch of R1b-L21 in Scotland is R1b-L1335. Now, there are a few different branches of this haplogroup, but the particular Scottish cluster of this branch is RL1065, which is connected to Clan Campbell and Clan MacLaren. Another branch worth mentioning is RM222, often associated with Gaelic lineages. It is very high in Ireland, but is also elevated in Western Scotland given this genetic corridor. We also have a good idea as to the DNA marker of one of the most famous kings of the Scots, Robert the Bruce. Research from the University of Strathclyde indicates that he belonged to RFTB 15831, a branch downstream from RDF27, which is actually highest in Iberia today. In England, RL48 is a very common branch of R1b-U106, which is also high in places like the Netherlands and Germany, showing this continental link. RDF98 is another branch worth mentioning, which is linked to a number of royal European houses. These include the House of Bourbon, which ruled France for a period, and the House of Wettin, a dynasty which included many Saxon kings. Wettin is also the parent line of the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, which changed its name to Windsor in 1917, the current UK royal line. We also know the Y-DNA haplogroup of some other English royals. For instance, we know that the Y-DNA haplogroup of King Richard III, the King of England in the 15th century, was actually a very rare haplogroup in Britain, as he belonged to GP287, or G2. This didn't actually match the haplogroup of male line relatives, however, who belonged to R1b-U152, which indicates a false paternity event in the intervening generations, a story in and of itself for another time. Now, the next clue is physical traits and genetic patterns. Although this isn't the strongest clue, it can still give you hints. Red hair, for instance, is much more common in Scotland than England, at around 10 to 13% of the Scottish population, compared to roughly 4 to 6% in England. Certain genetic conditions can also give you clues. For example, hereditary hemochromatosis, sometimes called the Celtic curse, is much more common in Scotland and Ireland than it is in England. This reflects deeper population history and founder effects. So how can we sum this up overall? Well, Scotland generally retains more of an Atlantic Celtic genetic profile, with an influence from Norwegian Vikings as well. England shows a stronger influence from continental European populations, both thanks to the Anglo-Saxons and Danish Vikings. although there is plenty of regional variation in both countries. Now, when it comes to English DNA, two peoples are often very difficult to separate when it comes to their genetic legacy, the Anglo-Saxons and the Vikings, as there is lots of overlap. So what are some DNA differences between the two? Well, to find out, please click here. Thanks for watching, please subscribe and hit the bell, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below and what your ancestry is, and we'll see you next time.